Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I welcome you to yet another session on internal audit standards. I am privileged here to welcome CS Saurabh Arora, my younger brother, and the first speaker of the day. The second speaker of the day is also a very enterprising and astounding personality, CA Jitendra Arora. I'm thankful to the Yamunanagar branch for hosting this session. CA Amit Kashyap, the chairman, and CA Sumit Chedda, the secretary, both are here to ensure that you all feel the hospitality for which Yamunanagar is very famous. Let me very candidly tell you that I also belong to Yamunanagar. I was born and brought up in Yamunanagar. We also have a very young, enterprising, upcoming CA Harvinder Kaur, who belongs to Jalandhar. And she is again very keen to ensure that she gives her best to the alma mater to this great profession. So over to Harvinder, and then we should go on for the keynote address. Madam, the dais is all yours now.
Thank you so much, sir, for giving us the opportunity and the platform to consider the young persons for this. And I suppose that we will get the best out of it. Thank you so much. So just starting with the introduction of Charanjot Singh Nanda, sir, the Central Council member and the chairman, Internal Audit Standard Board. So just a brief introduction and some of the achievements and the designations. Nanda sir has been in Internal Audit Standard Board's ICI, the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. He was a member of Quality Review Board set up by the Government of India, and also the member of CCM, the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, from 2004 to 2016. He was a chairman of Committee on Internal Audit of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, and also the chairman of Committee for Members in Industry of the ICI. He was the chairman of Women Members Empowerment Committee of the ICI and the vice chairman of Public Finance and Government Accounting. So Nanda sir holds a very high position in the ICI, and these were some of the designations that were being held, and the current CCM member. So today's session regarding the IASB is being hosted by the Yamunanagar branch of NIRC, chairman being the CA Amit Kashyap sir, and present being here CA Saurabh Arora sir, and CA. The second speaker in the second session would be given by the Jitendra sir, almost 10 year experience. So over to you, Nanda sir. Please give the keynote as well.
Madam, we'll request the chairman of the host branch, Yamunanagar, to kindly give the welcome address.
Thank you, Nanda ji. Very good evening to one and all present here. CA Charanjot Singh Nanda ji, Central Council member and Chairman Internal Audit Standard Boards, ICI, and all our guests, ladies and gentlemen. My name is C. Amit Kashyap, and it's my privilege and pleasure on behalf of Yamunanagar branch of NRC of ICI to welcome you here today. First, I would like to welcome you all and thank everyone for coming. I appreciate your effort to be together virtually. I would like to take a moment to introduce our exemplary and visionary mentor, C.A. Charanjot Singh Nanda ji. Kabir Das ने कहा है कि गुरु की महिमा का वर्णन करना शब्दों में संभव नहीं है. मैं बस इतना ही कहूंगा. Sir, we are blessed with your presence. I would also like to welcome our today's keynote speaker, C.A. Saurabh Arora ji, C.A. Jitendra Indoria ji. I look forward to hearing your discussion and learning from your insights. I want to say welcome again. It's wonderful to see so many of you here. Let's proceed with this meeting together. Thank you. Over to you, Harvinder ji.
Thank you so much, sir, for your such a warm welcome. So starting with the first session will be on the topic Standards on Internal Audit 330 and will be given by CA Saurabh Arora sir ji. Sir holds Corporate Audit HCL Technology Limited, and he was the November 2011 batch pass chartered accountant. He was practicing in the field of audits until 2018 and then joined the corporate audit team of HCL. He has been a part of study group Internal Audit Standards Board and have co-authored 350 standards on internal audit and 390 published last year. He has also been CA final auditing faculty with the ICI. So the introduction part with the Sir Saurabh Arora sir, please start with the first session.
Thank you,
Madam,
Arvinder ma'am.
I will have to take the keynote address before Saurabh starts. Give me a second. I'll take the keynote and then we'll invite Saurabh to give the session, because he and Indraji have to take the sessions in continuation. Give me a second. Let me put my PPT. Hold for a second.
Okay, sir, sure.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you all to the virtual CP meeting, Standards on Internal Audit. We'll be taking SIA 330, Internal Audit Documentation, SIA 390, Monitoring and Reporting of Prior Audit Issues, SIA 230, Objectives of Internal Audit, SIA 240, Using the Work of an Expert. So when you come to SIA 330, Standards on Internal Audit Documentation, so you need to understand that complete and sufficient documentation will not only help you in giving the best services to the client, but later at any stage, if there is any questioning by the disciplinary committee, this document shall act as your savior. So what we need to validate the audit findings and support the basis on which audit observations are made and conclusions reached from those findings. Very, very important. We need to aid in the supervision and review of the internal audit work. That is very, very important, and that is our job. And we need to establish what we need to establish. The work performed is in conformance with the applicable pronouncement of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. Any CA performing any technical assignment needs to be in conformation with the applicable pronouncements of ICI. Now, SIA 330, Internal Audit Documentation. I would like to tell you that this standard tries to explain certain key requirements in the process of collection, preparation, retention, and subsequent review of internal audit documentation. This standard explains nature of documentation, content and sufficiency of documents. Very much what is the nature and what is the content and sufficiency of the document. What is the documentation process? How the timely completion of document and confirmation of compliance is very important. So largely it speaks on the documents and whether they are sufficient to be an audit evidence. What is the process of collecting the documents? What time the documents have to be collected, and how you do the confirmation of compliances. Now we come on to SIA 390, monitoring and reporting of prior audit issues. Now what are prior audit issues? Prior audit issues are issues which are still in vogue when the audit period is being ended. So what you have to do? You have to take care of proper monitoring and closure of open issues from prior audits. The prior audits, proper monitoring and closure of open issues is required. Independent validation of corrective action. Whatever issues you have raised, what action the auditee has taken is very, very important. Third, escalation of any concerns in case of delays in closure of issues. If there is issues not being closed, you need to escalate to the appropriate authority or to the board or to the audit committee where you are answerable. Timely reporting of status to those charged with governance. You have to report the status of the assignment, the status of the audit to the person who is charged with governance. Standards on internal audit, SIA 390, monitoring and reporting of prior audit issues. Now what this guidance, this standard provides? First, monitoring of prior issues. All prior issues needs to be taken into account, which are resolved and which are not resolved. So you first of all, if they're not resolved, they need to be closed. And if they're in the process that they can't be closed, then escalation has to be done and the entire issue needs to be documented. The third standard is standard on internal audit 230. What are the objectives of internal audit? Yes. What are the objectives? Why people want internal audit to be done? And what are the terms of engagement and why we need it? First, you need to document the formation and functioning of the internal audit activity and the terms of the outsourced internal audit arrangement. Very, very important. The entire scope and whatever drives us has to be penned down by way of an engagement letter. Provide clarity to the internal auditor and its stakeholders regarding the nature of the internal audit setup and its working, so that you are able to appropriately add value to the entire perspective. Ensure linkage between what is expected of the internal auditor and how those expectations can be met within the framework governing internal audit. There should not be any expectation gap, and whatever gap is there, that needs to be suitably put into the right contours. Promote better understanding on key operational areas such as accountability and authority, roles and responsibility, and such other functional matters which would help us. So we need to promote better understanding on key operational areas. Standard on internal audit 230, which is objectives of internal audit. This standard deals with every internal audit shall be guided by a document. Now, what does the document do? The document defines the objectives of internal audit. It is the duty of the chief of internal audit to have in place a written internal audit charter documenting the formation and functioning of the internal audit activity. That written charter, which speaks very well on the scope and, more importantly, the authority in which it is being awarded. The objectives and operating parameters are formally recorded in one of these two documents. Number one, an internal audit charter primarily designed for the in-house team of internal auditors and its stakeholders. Internal audit charter. What the internal audit expectations are, what are the processes, what are the control environment. And second, an engagement letter, which is a formal agreement signed with the outsourced internal audit service provider. Now, the standards on internal audit 240, using the work of an expert. Using the work of an expert will put you at a parlance where you start understanding how the work has to be used, because you may not have the expertise in-house in the company. So you'll have to use the work of an outside expert. So in conducting internal audit assignments, the chief of internal audit may seek the assistance and place a reliance on the work of an expert. This may be in the form of specific audit procedures covering a complex area or field such as information technology, civil, electrical, mechanical engineering, banking, oil and gas industry, etc. Or a unique and specialized discipline such as actuarial services, forensic audit, taxation, treasury operations, financial products, risk modeling, intellectual property or business valuation. So this will give us a total thought process of the areas where we need indulgence and help of the outside expert. And when you use the services of an outside expert, you need to understand how you use that for your report writing and how you escalate on the report. You exhibit that these are the areas, and this person having these qualifications, after taking the report from the expert, you need to use your professional skepticism and acumen to ensure that the report is on the right direction. Standard on internal audit STA 240, using the work of an expert. Now, this standard applies to all internal audit assignments where there is a standard which says knowing your client's business. So this is in line with that if you are finding some issues, then you have to use the work of an expert. So where part of the internal audit work is completed by an expert and relied upon by the internal audit to provide an independent assurance. So when the internal auditor has to provide an independent assurance, how? The work done by expert is to be valued. So ladies and gentlemen, I thank you all for giving me a very patient hearing so that I'm able to very effectively explain to you the basic purpose of this webinar today on internal audit standards. And I want to tell you, the more correct you are, the more strong you are, the better would be your quality of reporting. Somebody asked Swami Vivekananda, they said, Swami, you have gone through Veda and Upanishads n numbers of times. Can you tell me in a line the gist of Veda Upanishads? Swami smiled and said, my boy, in a line, I shall not only tell you the gist of Veda Upanishads, I will tell you the entire concept on which India thrives. The words uttered by Swamiji are written in golden words. He said, strength is life and weakness is death. When we are strong on documentation, when you have honed your technical skills, the outcome of our assignments will really be very formidable, very great. But if you are not strong, I'm reminded of a couplet which says, कुछ ऐसे बदहवास हुए आंधियों से हम कुछ ऐसे बदहवास हुए, आंधियों से हम, जो पेड़ खोखले थे हम उन्हीं से लिपट गए। एक खोखले पेड़ से लिपट कर आप मुंह के बल गिरते हैं। So the most important thing is that always be with strong people, remain strong, hone up your technical skills, and your board is passionately there to ensure that we give best of the services to you. In case you want to write on standard, you want knowledge or guidance on any standard, please feel free to write to the board. The board will ensure that you have the best. Over to Madam Harvinder Kaur, the moderator of the day for further proceedings. A great sessions have to come by Mr. Saurabh Arora and by Jitendra Nandoria, and under the chairmanship of my younger brother, Sumit Kashyap, Amit Kashyap, the chairman, Yamunanagar branch, and Sumit Chedda, the secretary, YNR branch, ably supported by CA Harvinder Kaur from Kartarpur, a very enterprising young CA, so that things are all in the right stream. Thanks, and I wish this session a great success. Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, sir, for giving us such a beautiful keynote regarding the standards on internal audit to be discussed today for the session. And the lesson of being strong is beautifully explained and given by the sir. Thank you so much, sir. So starting with the session, topics for the session 1 to be issued by CA Saurabh Arora, sir, on standards SIA 330 internal audit documentation and standards on internal audit. And the second standard, SIA 390, monitoring and reporting of prior audit issues. So over to you, CA Saurabh Arora, sir. Please start with the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Harvinder ma'am. Thank you, Mr. Amit. Thank you, Nanda sir. Thank you, Mr. Sumit, for giving me this opportunity to speak on these topics. So we are going to start with SIA 330 and 390. Please let me share my screen. So we are going to start with SIA 330, internal audit documentation. So the internal audit documentation, to introduce this topic, the internal audit documentation refers to the written record. It's not just the oral record, it's the written record, electronic or otherwise. It can be in the paper form or in a digital form also, of the internal audit procedures performed. The second is, it is the relevant audit evidence obtained. So it also refers to the what are the relevant audit evidence obtained. Third is the conclusions reached by the internal auditor on the basis of such procedures and evidences. So sometimes it is confused that only the audit evidence is to be obtained as the documentation, but not just that, also the conclusions reached by the internal auditor, that has to be also recorded in the documentation, and that also forms part of the overall documentation. After that, to quote an example, the internal auditor verified the documented P2P process, which is procure to pay process, with the evidencing documents at each step. For example, purchase requisition, quotation comparison sheet, final PO, etc. However, he could not identify any process gap in that process. So will the documents related to this audit activity and its conclusion form part of the audit documentation? So the answer is yes. So obviously the documents that not just confirms the audit observation, but which refutes the audit observation, and according to which the auditor has reached to a certain conclusion, that should form part of the audit documentation. So purpose of audit documentation is not just supporting the audit observation. I'll repeat, the purpose of audit documentation, it's not just supporting the audit observation, but also to serve as the proof of all the audit activities undertaken. So it's not just supporting the audit observation, but also the proof of all the activities, the audit activities undertaken. And here it comes to the matter of professional judgment. What are the relevant audit documents that need to be documented, and what are the conclusions that need to be documented by the chartered accountant, by the internal auditor? Second point is the internal auditor is expected to record. First he has to record and then collate all the evidence. How he or she will collate the evidence, that we'll see in the following slides. Whether confirming or refuting the audit assertion, as explained in the previous example as well, obtained in the form of complete and sufficient audit documentation. So the manner of the audit documentation has also been explained. It should be complete and it should be sufficient. Then the standard explains certain key requirements. So these are not just recommendatory, these are the requirements according to the standards of internal audit of ICAI. So the standard explains certain key requirements in the process of collection, preparation, retention, and subsequent review of internal audit documentation. Please underline and understand these key terms, which are collection, preparation, retention, and subsequent review of the internal audit documentation. Each of this step is utterly important. So for example, the internal auditor observed high sales return from a certain customer on account of poor quality. He verified the documents in quality check department, but could not find any fault of the quality check process. So will the documents related to this audit activity and its conclusion form part of the audit documentation? Even if he hasn't found any problem with the quality check process, will the documents related to this audit activity, this conclusion, form part of the audit documentation? It will form part of the audit documentation, because as discussed earlier, it had the conclusions reached by the internal auditor also form part of the audit documentation. And scope, talking about the scope of this SIA 330, it applies to all the internal audit assignments. So it is very pertinent to note that audit documentation is required in all types of internal audit assignments. Then coming to the objectives of the internal audit documentation standard, the objectives of preparing complete and sufficient audit documentation is to A, validate the audit findings and support the basis on which audit observations are made and conclusions are reached from these findings. So this isn't the sole purpose, not just validating and supporting the observations is the sole purpose of audit documentation. What are the other purposes and objectives of audit documentation? These are aiding in the supervision and review of the internal audit work. So overall work of the internal audit has to be reviewed and supervised according to the standard on this subject. So this also forms a part of the inbuilt checks and balances in the internal audit process, that it aids in the supervision and review of the overall internal audit work. Third is the established that work performed is in conformance with the applicable pronouncements of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. So this is another important aspect of the internal audit documentation, and this establishes and proves that the work done by the internal auditor is actually in conformance with the pronouncement of the ICAI. So other ancillary objectives of the internal audit documentation is that it serves as the record of significant matters in subsequent audits as well. So not just for this period, it will also form the foundation. It will also form as the foundation bedrock for the subsequent audits as well. And also it provides better understanding of the business processes and the information required by the succeeding auditors as well. So it sets the basic benchmark on which the following year's documentation is to be compared with and to be built upon. So not just for the comparison, but to be built upon to carry forward the legacy of the internal audit that had been done in the previous time. Then the overall objective of preparing audit documentation, this sums up the entire objective of the internal audit documentation SIA. The overall objective of preparing audit documentation is to allow the internal auditor to form an opinion on the outcome of the assignment. This is what the internal audit documentation is understood in the common parlance as well. But also the internal audit documentation must stand on its own and not require any follow-up clarifications or additional information to arrive at the same conclusion. So this is very important that the internal audit documentation should be complete in all sense, and it should form and any other internal auditor through peer review or through the supervision and review as per the standard. The chartered accountant or the internal auditor should arrive at the same conclusion considering the same audit documentation that has been prepared by the internal auditor. For example, for a certain discrepancy in a ledger, the same should be highlighted or separated as an annexure. For calculation-based conclusion, for example, a recovery from a vendor, this is a certain percentage of yearly billing, a labeled calculation can be annexed with total recoverable amount. Third, for a process explanation to set the background of process gaps and observations, a flow chart can be used to give the logical view of authorities and responsibilities at various levels of the process. The entire objective of all these three examples is that all the entire audit, the internal audit documentation must stand on its own and not require any additional information or any additional explanation from the person who has actually conducted the internal audit. Then coming to the requirements and explanatory notes of the SIA 330, the internal auditor shall record the nature, timing, and extent of completion of all internal audit activities and testing procedures in the form of reproducible documents. So the documents should be reproducible. The internal auditor should record the nature of activities, timing, and extent of completion of all internal audit activities, and the procedures that he or she might have performed while conducting this audit. Documentation includes written records that we have discussed of various audit activities and procedures conducted, including evidence gathered, information collected, notes taken, and meetings held. So please underline this: notes taken and meetings held should also be recorded, and it should not, and it should form part of the internal audit documentation as well. It includes internal memoranda, letters of confirmation and representation. Those are management representation letter, checklists, external reports and correspondence, including emails concerning significant matters, abstracts or copies of the entity's records. For example, ledgers, bank statements, policy documents can also form part of the audit documentation. Significant and specific contracts and agreements, for example, stating discount or SLA penalty clauses, can also form part of the audit documentation. And these could be included wherever these are appropriate. So not all the documents need to be, all the company's documents need to be documented. Only those documents which are considered appropriate as per the professional judgment and skepticism of the auditor. Also, there's this adage that work not documented is work not done. So if you're not going to document the work that you are doing, so you will not be able to prove that you have actually conducted those procedures and found them to be okay. So even for the procedures where you find no observations and you reach a certain conclusion that this process or this activity was fine according to you, that has to be also documented. Then the documents need not necessarily be printed on paper, and soft, electronic, or digital version may be used and filed. However, where an alternate method of recording and storage is used, it must be reproducible in print form if required, similar in nature to the original document. So this is self-explanatory, but to put it in a better context, I have put in two examples over here. So for example, if you are auditing the utilization of some software units and you want to see that how much of it has been utilized, for example, if the procured quantity was 10,000 units and you want to see whether all the 10,000 units have been utilized or not, so you can go for the live utilization test of the software units. And for the live utilization, generally it can only be captured with a screenshot on a computer with time and date stamp to reproduce it at the later stage. Where time and date stamp is not available, a written confirmation can be obtained from the IT asset manager along with the screenshot. Another example is Facebook and LinkedIn subscription logins for the marketing team, or the job portal logins for the HR team might only be available on the email, and that should only form part of the audit documentation of the procurement. The second example relates to only the procurement, and the first example relates to the actual utilization of such licenses and software. I hope this is clear. Then I have put in a case study. A process walkthrough was provided to an internal auditor over Zoom meeting. It was recorded by the auditor to keep it a part of the audit record. One of the statements of the process owner was the inventory recording and custody is taken care by two-member team. The inventory recording and its custody is taken care by two-member team. That was the statement given by the process owner to the internal auditor over Zoom meeting. In the draft internal audit report, the internal auditor pointed out this as the breach of segregation of duties principle. Process owner refuted it, saying the process walkthrough has been given to the internal auditor, and it was clearly told that two-member team is doing the work, which meant there was clear segregation of duties. The internal auditor replayed the recording and realized that the statement was unclear, it was ambiguous. The above situation could have been avoided by documenting the auditor's process understanding as minutes of meeting on the email and taking confirmation from the process owner over such Zoom meeting. So this is very important that once the meeting is done and the process owner is not documenting the entire conversation, and it is the responsibility of the internal auditor to record the entire conversation as the minutes of meeting, and that can be shared over the email or a signature can be taken so that the correct understanding is formed in the mind of the auditor, and the same is documented in the audit documentation file. So oral explanation, which is Zoom meeting as well. So oral explanation cannot substitute written documentation at any point of the time. Then coming back to the other requirements and explanatory notes, documentation shall be complete and sufficient to support the analysis conducted on the audit evidence, the identification of findings, the formulation of audit observations, and drafting of the internal audit reports based on the findings. Documentation shall clearly state the purpose of the procedure, the source of the evidence, the outcome of the audit work, and identify the performer and reviewer. What is generally seen in the internal auditor documentation file is that the evidences are there, the observation is there, but the purpose of the procedure is not recorded. The performer and reviewer are not recorded in the internal auditor documentation. And this has been recorded as the requirement of this standard of internal audit, that this also needs to be recorded in the audit documentation file itself, that who was the performer, who was the reviewer, what is the source of the evidence, whether it's a valid source or not, and then what is the outcome of the audit, also the purpose of the entire procedure. So documentation shall be complete and sufficient. This is the manner that has been mandated by the institute, that the documentation shall be complete and sufficient in all the manner to support the analysis conducted on the audit evidence and then the identification of findings. The content and extent of documentation is a matter of professional judgment. This has been left over to the judgment of each and individual case and to the judgment of the internal auditor. However, all significant matters which require exercise of judgment, together with the internal auditor's conclusion thereon, shall be included in the internal audit documentation. So the basis of the judgment, basis of exercise of the judgment that has been taken by the internal auditor shall also be documented. And documents shall be sufficient and complete to avoid the need for follow-up or inquiry, useful and relevant to the objectives of the audit procedure, undergo at least one level of review or approval. So this is the inbuilt checking mechanism, inbuilt quality check mechanism that has been put in by the standard itself, that the audit documentation should undergo at least one level of review and approval. And then all the internal audit documentation should be dependable and reliable. Therefore, it should be made by a responsible person to allow a peer reviewer to reach the same conclusion. So dependable and reliable to allow a peer reviewer to reach at the same conclusion. So the conclusions must also be reasonable and free from all the biases. Then the document shall be sufficient and complete. I'll just put in more examples over there. So to avoid the need for follow-up inquiry, for example, well labeled and with all the requisite information in one place to form the same opinion. It should be well labeled and it should have all the requisite information in one place. Useful and relevant to the objectives of the audit procedure. Example, avoiding reference to other IE assignments or similar mistakes in the processes which are out of scope of current audit. We don't want to scandalize our audit reports, and we just want to keep it to the audit objective that has been given to us in the audit engagement letter. Then it should undergo at least one level of review and approval. And it should be dependable and reliable to allow a peer reviewer to reach at the same conclusion. For example, from a valid and relevant source along with his approval, who has the authority of the underlying information. Then the internal audit function shall maintain a written process explaining the manner in which the documentation will be prepared, reviewed, stored, and finally discarded to ensure quality and conformance to standards on internal audit. So the internal audit function shall maintain a written process. So that process should always be there, that what will be the process of the overall internal auditor documentation, how it will be prepared, who will prepare it, who will be responsible for actually preparing it, writing it down, who will review it, and then how it will be stored, and then how it will be discarded. What is the discard policy of these documents? Then the internal audit documentation shall be collated and arranged logically in files as audit work papers and retained to support the performance of the internal audits as per the written process. So as per the written process only, it should be collated, arranged, and retained. It shall include various quality checks. So you would notice that the Institute of Chartered Accountants has already included many quality checks, many layers of quality checks in the standard itself, so that this could be standard. These internal audit documentation could be standardized as much as it is possible. And then the quality checks that have been recommended by the institute include checks of completeness, that is, list of contents of all the work papers should be there, checks of relevance, cross-reference to findings and reports, and check of conformance to standard of internal audit, that is, reference to relevant SIAs. There must be inbuilt quality check mechanism in the audit firm's documentation process and should be as standardized as possible to remove individual auditors' biases. Then, all audit work papers should be retained in accordance with the legal and company's retention policy and only shared with those who are authorized to access them. Advice of legal counsel and or approval of senior management or engaging authority shall be obtained prior to releasing any audit documentation to external parties. So since we all know that internal audit documentation is the property of the internal auditor only, so before releasing any audit documentation to the external parties, the advice of legal counsel or approval of senior management should be taken. Example, clear also includes avoiding ambiguous language in documenting audit observations. Difference of 2.5 lakhs between store register and books of accounts exists. This statement is completely ambiguous and incomplete because it does not say that which amount is more and which is less, and what are those amounts, and what is the purpose of this audit? What is the purpose of this audit observation and this audit procedure? That has also not been provided to us. So this is clearly ambiguous and incomplete, and this type of statement should not form part of the audit documentation. Then the internal audit work paper files shall be completed prior to the issuance of final internal audit report. So this should be ensured that all the internal audit work paper files should be completed before the issuance of the final internal audit report. Any pending administrative matters like arranging the files, etc., shall also be completed within 60 days of the release of the final report. Audit working papers shall be compiled into internal audit files soon after the completion of all audit procedures, while pending matters may be closed during the draft stage of the audit report. However, the final audit report shall not be released unless all significant audit evidence has been collected and documented. So this has to be ensured that unless and until all the significant audit evidence has been collected, documented, and arranged, it should not be, the final audit report shall not be released. The administration process of arranging the final audit files can be completed within 60 days of the release of the final. Documentation is more likely to be accurate and in conformation with the audit observation if it is made sooner than later. So this is a very important point to be kept in mind, that internal audit documentation should be as soon as possible within the completion timeline of the final audit procedures. And to avoid remembering the vast amounts of information or to repeat the task after the procedure is performed, or to go back to the auditee for the same information or explanation, that will also taint the reputation of the internal auditors if we go back to the auditee and ask for the same information or explanation, and that should be avoided at all the cost, just by being a little more proactive in the documentation purposes. So coming to the ownership and custody of the internal audit documentation, we all know that these working papers are only the property of the internal auditor, and where part of the audit work is outsourced to an external audit service provider or an expert, or reliance is placed on the work papers to be issued on some external party, the ownership of the working papers shall be assumed by the internal auditor from the third party. However, where reliance is placed only on the report of the third party, which insists on retaining ownership on their working papers, adequate provisions shall be in place to have access to the work papers if and when required for quality review purposes or for some other purpose. So the auditor must have the right of reproducing those documents. So going back to the basic principle of this standard was that it should be in the reproducible form. So here we are ensuring the reproduction of those internal audit documents by making this as the right of the internal auditor, even on the working papers of the external party on which reliance is being placed while we are preparing our final internal audit. So this is about the SIA 330 internal audit documentation. Now coming to the SIA 390, which is monitoring and reporting of prior audit issues. So this standard deals with the responsibility of the internal auditor in monitoring and reporting of prior audit issues, usually in the form of an action taken report of previous audits. The internal auditor must not just monitor, but also report the status of prior audit issues. So this is of pertinent importance that not just monitoring is required, but also the reporting of the status of the prior audit issues is required. Only then will we be able to justify the execution, the implementation of the process of our audit recommendations, according to which the risk shall be mitigated or reduced, which is the objective of the internal audit assignments. The term monitoring and reporting used in the standard refers to the periodic tracking of issues raised during prior audit and evaluation of the corrective actions undertaken by the auditee to resolve them and to report any open and pending matters to the management and those charged with governance, for example, the audit committee. So it is not just the tracking, but evaluation of the corrective actions also. So this also forms part of the of SIA 390. The standard applies to all prior internal audits where audit issues remain open, pending the implementation of audit recommendation within the pre-agreed timelines. So for example, pending automation of some process, for example, a cash application process within agreed timeline, falling after the issue of final internal audit report. So this could be an example of the prior audit issue. The specific objectives of this standard are to ensure that proper monitoring and closure of open issues from prior audits is done, independent validation of corrective actions taken by the audit. So it's not just the monitoring and closure, but the validation of corrective actions as well. Whether the risk is actually mitigated or not, that has to be ensured. Then escalation of any concerns in case of delays in closure of issues. So that has also been made a part of this SIA, the escalation also. And then timely reporting of status to those charged with governance. The key word over here is timely. Late reporting might defeat the very purpose of the entire audit. For example, in the meanwhile, the risk might come true and result in undesirable circumstances. From this follows the overall objective of this SIA 390, which is the overall objective of this standard is to ensure that the auditee mitigates the risk highlighted. So this is the basic objective, that the risks should be mitigated in the audit observation through timely corrective action plans, or that a conscious decision is taken to accept the risk. Either the risk is mitigated or the auditee takes the conscious decision that they accept the risk in case the recommendations are delayed or not implemented. So this is the entire objective and gist of this SIA 390. To get into details, we'll refer to the requirements and explanatory notes of this SIA. So here we define the responsibilities of various parties involved. The chief internal auditor, on the engagement partner, is responsible for continuously monitoring the closure of prior audit issues through a timely implementation of action plans included in the past audits. So who is responsible for the continually monitoring the prior audit issues? It is chief internal auditor or the engagement partner. And this shall be done with a formal monitoring process, elements of which are pre-agreed with management and those charged with governance. So this is of very important. This is a very important statement, that the elements of the monitoring process is also pre-agreed with the management and those charged with governance. It should not come out as a surprise when we do the follow-up of our prior audit issues, or when we report on those or escalate on those issues to the management or those charged with governance. And when this could be, monitoring process could be established, it could be established ideally before the starting of the internal audit engagement, that is at the time of the internal audit engagement letter itself. Then the responsibility to implement the action plan remains with the management. So the responsibility of implementation is always with the management. Implementing the action plan or assuming the risk is always with the management or those charged with governance. So the auditor cannot and can never be held responsible for non-implementation of the audit recommendations. The internal auditor can only recommend or suggest the recommendations according to which the risks could be mitigated, but he cannot be held responsible for the non-implementation. Then the management is responsible for timely implementation, not just implementation, but in a timely manner of corrective action plans to address the prior audit issues as per the agreed timelines. The chief internal auditor or the designate will undertake a follow-up with the auditee. So even though the chief internal auditor is the main person responsible for the follow-up, but he doesn't necessarily need to do that. He can designate it to somebody else who will undertake a follow-up with the auditee after the lapse of agreed time schedule for implementing the agreed actions, so as to evaluate the status of resolution. So it is not just the status of the audit issue, it is the status of resolution that has to be evaluated. An automated process which continually alerts all parties may be implemented by the management to ensure an effective follow-up. This could be in the form of auto emailers with automatic escalation as per the timelines and escalation matrix. And what is escalation matrix? It is nothing but the escalation procedure, the monitoring forms part of a formal monitoring process that we discussed in the earlier slide, which is pre-agreed with the management and as per the comfort of the management and those charged with governance. We are not going to decide on this escalation matrix by ourselves. It is the responsibility of the management. Then after receiving confirmation from the auditee regarding the implementation of corrective actions, does our responsibility stop there? No, sir. Additional audit procedures shall be performed by the internal auditor to confirm whether those issues have actually been adequately addressed or not. So this is the very purpose of this SIA, that we need to go and confirm whether the issues have been adequately addressed or not, whether the risks have been mitigated or not. Only then will there be any value addition by the overall internal audit assignment. If risk is not mitigated, there is no purpose of the entire audit assignment that we have done. Then sufficient and appropriate audit evidences shall be obtained. So here also, the earlier discussed SIA will come into play of the documentation. We will have to collect the sufficient and appropriate audit evidence on the basis of a further audit procedure that we are going to perform to validate the closure of these prior audit issues, and which shall be maintained or updated to confirm whether effective closure of the issues or reasons for its delay or deferral. So these conditions can also arise that there are delays, or it has been deferred, or no work has been done on the prior audit issues by the management. So we'll see how we'll deal with those situations. So for critical or sensitive issues, for example, those rated high risk or with fraud risk in our previous internal audit report, follow-up audit procedures shall be performed to ensure that the risk has been mitigated to an acceptable level. So what we have to ensure is that the risk has to be mitigated to an acceptable level, and for that we need to perform follow-up audit procedure. For medium risk issues, documentation proof of the implementation of audit recommendation may be acceptable. Only on the basis of documentation proof, we may say that, okay, this has been mitigated. But if you want to perform further audit procedure, you can definitely go and perform and to your satisfaction only. For low risk issues, a written note confirmation from management may be sufficient. So we must underline the terms that the SIA is using. The SIA is using only may term, and it is not using the shall term over here. So we may accept these low risk issues only on the basis of the written note confirmation from the auditee. However, the documentation for all these three categories of risk shall be maintained as per the standards on internal audit 330, which is internal audit documentation. So we are not exempted from maintaining the internal audit documentation in any of these categories, and this must form a very important part of the internal audit documentation also. And then if on the basis of additional audit procedures and evidence collected, the corrective actions appear to be sufficient to address the issue, the internal auditor may close the observation and issue a closure report. So here a closure report is also to be issued, and how it is issued? It is issued in the form of action taken report. We can close that audit observation over there. And then in case of ineffective or non-implementation, so in both the cases where it has not been implemented or where the implementation is ineffective and not to the satisfaction of the recommendation or intention of recommendation of the internal auditor, the internal auditor shall communicate the same as per the escalation procedures which was predefined. If despite such escalations, the recommendation remain pending, the internal auditor shall either obtain a written confirmation from the management that it accepts the risk, or issue a note of unaddressed risk consequent to non-implementation of the audit recommendation. Please note that this issue of a note of unaddressed risk will come into your favor in case any undesirable circumstances like any legal case opens up. There you can go and say that we had clearly stated and given this issue, this note that these risks are unaddressed, and we are not taking responsibility for this unaddressed risk, and it is not the gross negligence or negligence on the part of the internal auditor, that we did not identify these risks in our audit. We clearly stated and communicated these risks to the management. But despite such constant reminders, as per the escalation matrix also, the management refused, or management did not take any step on that. So this will come into your favor in a big way. So this is very important, that you either obtain a written confirmation from the management that it accepts the risk, or you issue a note of the unaddressed risk. And then only you may be absolved from your responsibility of mitigating the risk through the internal audit. So I hope this is clear. Moving on to the next slide. This is just the flow chart of what we have just discussed in the prior audit issue. So either the sufficient or corrective action is taken, close the observation and issue the closure report. Or the other possibility is that ineffective or non-implementation. Communicate as per the escalation procedure. If after such communication also sufficient corrective action is taken, then close the observation and issue the closure report as we have done in the earlier part. But if no effective action is taken, then obtain risk acceptance confirmation or issue a note of unaddressed risk. So this is about SIA 390. In case of delays or ineffective implementation of the agreed corrective actions, if there is ineffective implementation, or if there is delay in the implementation of the agreed corrective actions, the internal auditor shall escalate such delays and concerns to the appropriate levels of management. However, so this is a new thing, that if new facts come to light justifying the ineffective or delayed implementation, if the management was correct on their part that they could not effectively implement because of some new circumstances, the internal auditor may agree upon a new time-bound action plan. So please note that it has to be a time-bound action plan. And in such a situation, the follow-up timelines may be reset, or the issue may be deferred to the next audit, and plan to carry forward such audit recommendation may be agreed upon with the management. So if new facts come to light justifying the ineffective or delayed implementation, a new time-bound action plan can be decided upon, and follow-up timelines may be reset and the issue may be deferred. The internal auditor shall periodically report to the management and audit committee the status of prior issues. What is that periodicity? That has not been defined by the institute. It has been left upon the pre-agreed that escalation procedure and monitoring process. In that only we can define the periodicity of such reminders and such reports, including providing a confirmation of closure based on additional procedures. Then aging of issues is also very important, and that should be provided. So aging of issues pending closure and reasons for any delays, if there are any valid reasons, that can also be recorded in the action taken report. So when the internal auditor observes any delay in the agreed time schedule for implementation, the internal auditor shall intimate the auditee and agree to a new time schedule. On further delays in timelines of implementation, the auditor shall escalate details of delays to the management as per the agreed escalation protocol. Status update including aging and delays in issue resolution should be periodically updated with the management and the auditor. Now coming to the documentation, the internal auditor shall document the working papers according to SIA 330, which shall include the monitoring plan. So that monitoring plan has to be documented, including the escalation procedures and protocols that has to be followed. Then the auditee's confirmation of either completion of the implementation or reasons for part or non-implementation, and thereby acceptance of the risk. This is very important. Then the documentary evidence and working papers to support additional audit procedures performed to confirm or refute the closure of prior audit issues. Then escalation communication with the corresponding management responses and periodic status reports issued to the management and those charged with governance. So these are the documentation that should be maintained for this SIA 390. So this is about the SIA 390, and I hope all of you have understood the gist of this SIA 390 and 330. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Saurabh sir, for enlightening our knowledge regarding both the essays by adding the examples and the case studies as well. So coming to session 2, the Jitendra Indoria sir will be considering the SIA 230 and 240. So some of the brief introduction regarding the Jitendra Indoria sir. He is a qualified chartered accountant with more than 10 years of experience in internal audits, risk assessment, process improvement, internal controls, ERM, and preparation of standard operation practices. Jitendra ji has extensively worked with the leading power distribution and generation company of India. He has also worked on one of the leading renewable power company. He also has experience in carrying out process review and providing process improvements for various other sectors such as manufacturing, textile, engineering, retail, chemicals, and pharma. So coming on the topics to be discussed, SIA 230 and 240. Objectives of internal audit and standard on internal audit 240 using the expert of an expert will be discussed by the Jitendra Indoria sir. So please, sir, we invite you, we welcome you to the session, and we hand over the dice to you.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, Arvinder ji. Thank you, Amit ji. Thank you, Sumit ji. Thank you, Nanda sir, for giving me this opportunity. So I'll be covering two SIAs. One is SIA 230, which is related to objectives of internal audit, wherein we will be discussing what is the purpose of defining the objectives of internal audit, what are the scopes and objective of internal audit function, and what are the components of a typical internal audit charter and engagement letter, and what is the difference between an internal audit charter and engagement letter. And in SIA 240, which is using the work of an expert, we will be going through the what is the requirement for appointing an expert, what is the purpose of expert in internal audit, how we can evaluate the work which is to be done by the expert, what is the independence and objectivity of the expert, and what are the qualifications or credentials which are required, and who will be the person who will be who we will say as an expert, because it needs to be a person with some technical background and technical knowledge, or it needs to be an expert in the respective area. So I'll just put up my PPT. Yeah, so I've already discussed that what will be the contents of SIA 230 and SIA 240. So moving on to SIA 230, which is objectives of internal audit. So the objectives of internal audit, basically is to help establish the operating parameters within the overall internal audit agenda. So the main objectives can be classified into four aspects. One is related to the document the formation and functioning of the internal audit activity and the terms of the outsourced internal audit arrangement. So, some companies are having their in-house internal audit department, and some companies are fully outsourcing the internal audit to a third party. Or there are some companies who are having a mixed kind of thing, wherein some part of the work will be done by in-house team and some part will be done by the outsourced service provider. So in case of in-house service team, what will be the document which will be the guiding factor, and for the outsourced, what will be the document which will be the guiding factor, which will contain all the terms and conditions and how the work will be performed. Second objective is to provide clarity to the internal auditor and its stakeholders regarding the nature of the internal audit. The third purpose of defining the objective is to ensure the linkage between what is expected of the internal auditor and how those expectations can be met. Because there should not be any situation where you start the work and you complete and submit the report, and at the end you come to know that the objective of this review was something different from what you are delivering. So there should be a document, or there should be some guidelines which defines what is the objective and what is the expectation of the management. So the internal auditor should work as per the expectations of the management or the stakeholders. And the fourth purpose of defining the objectives of internal audit is to promote better understanding on the key operational areas such as accountability, authority, roles and responsibilities, etc. So, what is the requirement of the internal audit objectives? So, the objectives and operating parameters are generally recorded in one of the two documents. So, first is internal audit charter, which is primarily designed for the in-house team of internal audit and its stakeholders. And second is an engagement letter, which is a formal agreement which is signed with the outsourced internal service provider. So suppose a third party or any CA firm or a big four is providing an internal audit service. So in that case, the company will be having an engagement letter signed with the third party, and that engagement letter will contain all the terms and conditions, the scope of work, what will be the fee, what will be the timeline, what scope areas needs to be covered. So all the details will be there in the engagement letter. And once the engagement letter is signed, that will be the guiding principle for carrying out the audit. So in case of a company, it is the duty of its chief of internal audit to have in place a written internal audit charter documenting the formation and functioning of the internal audit activity. And the chief of internal audit shall also ensure that the internal audit charter is reviewed and approved by those who are charged with the governance. And the internal audit charter and the engagement letter needs to be reviewed periodically by the chief of internal audit or the engagement partner. And if there are any changes which needs to be done, those needs to be updated in the either in the internal audit charter or in the engagement letter. And like I said that, in some cases, both the above documents may exist. So like if I give you an example, so there are many companies wherein they have a mixed kind of setup wherein, they have internal audit department also, and they outsource some technical areas to third party service providers who to use their expertise of the respective internal audit area. So the objectives of internal audit functions vary, widely and depend on the size and structure of the entity and the requirements of the management, and where applicable, also charged also with the people who are charged with the governance. So there are 5-6 objectives of internal audit. One is to monitoring of internal control. So the IEA function may be assigned specific responsibility for reviewing the control monitoring, reviewing the controls, monitoring the operations, and recommending any improvements which are required or which are necessitated. Second objective can be examination of financial and operating information. So the IEA function may also be assigned to review the means used to identify, measure, classify, and report financial and operating information, and to make any specific inquiry into individual items, including detailed testing of the transactions, balances, and procedures. So suppose if a company is finalizing its books of accounts basis some MIS, so the IEA function may be asked to review the MIS, what is the source of the information which is flowing into the MIS, and if the MIS is prepared manually, then also to check whether the information which is captured into the MIS, that is correct or not. This is done just to ensure that whatever financial and operating information which is captured in the financial accounts, those information needs to be correct. The third objective can be to review of compliance with laws and regulations. So the IEA function may also be assigned to review the economy, efficiency, and effectiveness of the operating activities, including the non-financial activities of the entity, wherein it can be assigned to the IEA function to review the compliance and of various laws and regulations which are applicable to the respective company. So nowadays there are so many softwares available in the market, wherein you just have to put all the compliance requirements into the tool, and whenever any due date or the compliance is due, it will give you an automatic pop-up or an email saying that the compliance is due after 15 days. You need to take these necessary steps. So once those steps are taken, then it can be updated into the tool saying that we have complied with the respective law and regulation. The fourth can be the governance, wherein the IA function may assess the governance process in its accomplishment of objectives on ethics, values, performance management, and accountability, and communicating the risk if there are any. Next step can be risk management, wherein the IA function may assist the organization by identifying and evaluating significant exposure to risk and contributing to the improvement of risk management and control system. There can be two parts in risk management. One can be ERM, which is enterprise risk management, wherein the IA function or the expert from the service provider, they study the whole business scenario. They study the key major processes, and they come out with the risk which are very critical to the respective company or to the respective process, and they ask the company or the stakeholders to define the mitigation also for that. So if I give you an example, so suppose for an power company, nowadays many people have started installing the solar panels on their rooftop. So if everybody install the solar panel, then it is a very big threat to the power distribution companies, because then the customer will not be too much dependent on the distribution company to provide them the power, because they are already generating the power from their solar panel. So this is a kind of risk. This is the kind of risk which an auditor through the ERM process identify, and then he asks the management and the respective stakeholders to provide the mitigation plan. And what is the mitigation plan, and how they can achieve the mitigation plan, and then they define the frequency to review that. Second aspect can be to pick up any specific area and do a deep dive into that area and see that what are the control lapses or what kind of risk are present in that particular process, and what are the steps which can be taken to mitigate those risks. Next objective can be to review of operating activities. So IA function may be assigned to review the economy, efficiency, and effectiveness of the operating activities, including the non-financial activities of the entity. So these are some kind of objectives which are to be defined for an internal audit function. Again, as I said, these depends on the size and structure of the company, and these may vary company to company. So these are the components of a typical internal audit charter. So the internal audit charter basically will have a major mission and vision of the internal audit function, which it indicates that what is the long-term view of the internal audit function and what is the reason of its existence. So suppose if the reason of its existence is only to coordinate with a third party to perform internal audit activities, so the mission and vision will be according to that. But if the mission and vision is to make internal audit department as self-sufficient, so going forward there is no need to outsource any specific area to a third party service provider, then the mission and vision of the function will be defined accordingly. Second component will be purpose and objectives of the internal audit, wherein it will indicate that what the internal audit function hopes to achieve in a certain period of time. Third component can be reporting structure and independence, which explains where the internal audit function is placed within the overall organization structure of the company and whom it reports to. Generally, the IA head of the company reports to board of directors or MD of the organization. The fourth component can be scope and approach, wherein the scope of internal audit shall be consistent with the goals and objectives of the internal audit function, and also in the line with the nature and extent of the assurance to be provided by internal auditor. Any entities, units excluded from the scope shall also be clearly noted. So, generally the scope and approach is defined basis what is the risk appetite of the company and what kind of transactions the company is into, and basis that the scope is defined at the start of the year. And if suppose if there are too many units in the company and some units are excluded, then the reason of that exclusion shall be clearly noted in the scope and approach, and that will be in the internal audit charter. Next component can be accountability and authority. So the internal auditor may be held accountable for certain deliverables beyond providing the basic assurance, such as improving the control environment, reducing the risk rating, or improving the compliance level, etc. Next component can be roles and responsibilities. So all the key job functions and activities are spelled out in this particular section. Next component can be quality assurance and conformance with the SIAs. So if it notes the check put in place to ensure that the reliability and credibility of the output is there. So what are the components of a typical engagement letter? So the component can be purpose and objectives of the internal objectivity is clearly defined in the engagement letter. Next can be scope and approach. So what will be the scope of audit and what will be the approach? How the internal audit will work, or how the internal audit will start the work? What will be the timelines? What will be the escalation metrics? So all those things are defined in the internal audit. Next can be accountability and authority, that who will be the responsible person, or if in case any escalation is required, then what will be the level of escalation and who will be the person to whom the escalation needs to be made. Next can be roles and responsibilities, wherein it will be clearly defined that what will be the role and responsibility of the third party service provider and what will be the role and responsibility of the internal audit department. Next can be limitations and confidentiality. So again, as I said, in the limitation part, it will be clearly spelled out that the internal audit is not responsible for implementation of the recommendation, or there will be a confidentiality clause also, that whatever data is provided to internal auditor as part of the audit, that data will remain confidential with him and he will not be sharing those data with any outside party. Next can be quality assurance and conformance with the SIAs. Next will be reporting and compensation, that what will be the reporting structure and what will be the fees which will be paid to the third party. One more component can be ownership of the working paper, which will be clearly defined, that who will be the owner of the working papers which will be prepared at the time of internal audit. Next, there will be a clause of termination of the agreement, that at what circumstances or at what time period the agreement can be terminated by both the parties, whether by the company or the third party service provider. Next SIA is SIA 240, which is using the work of an expert. So what is an expert? So generally an expert is a person or an entity. The entity can be association of person or a firm or a company or LLP, which possesses the certain special skills or unique knowledge along with some years of experience and expertise in a particular area, field or discipline. So now I'll give you an example here. Suppose if you are doing an audit for any power company or a pharma company, and wherein the client asks you to review their operation and maintenance process. So as a chartered accountant, you will not be having that technical expertise wherein you can go and see that what is the schedule which is prepared for operation and maintenance, what needs to be the frequency, what is the time which needs to be spent on each activity. So for that, generally we hire a person, or we recruit a person who will be either an engineer or a person who will be working in the in any company's operation and maintenance department, or who are handling similar kind of work from last so many years. So that person will be called as an expert. And why are the experts appointed? And expert is generally appointed to help complete part of an internal audit assignment in a situation where the required skills are not available within the internal audit team or function. So like I gave you an example of operation and maintenance process. So likewise, there are so many processes in so many departments wherein you need the expertise. So suppose if you are doing an audit of SAP or ITGC, so as a chartered accountant, we will not be having too much experience in the technicalities of SAP, how the SAP system works, what are the controls which can be placed, what is the segregation of duty conflict, what are the various modules in the SAP. So at that particular time, we may appoint a person who is an expert in SAP, and we can take his services. And how can expert assist the internal audit function? So the assistance by any expert may be by applying their expertise or technical know-how in the form of specific audit procedures covering a complex area or field, such as IT, civil, electrical, mechanical engineering, banking, oil and gas sector, or a unique and specialized discipline like actuarial services, forensic audit, taxation, treasury, operations, risk modeling, IP, business valuation. So suppose if, as an CA, if we are assigned to review the project audit, or if we are assigned to review the civil work which the company had carried out. So all we can do is we can only review the contract of the person to whom the contract was awarded, and we can check the compliance of the contract, and we can review the invoices. But if someone asks us to review the BOQ and the measurements and everything which were done, so we will not be able to do that. So for that, we can hire a civil engineer. So that civil engineer will be called as an expert. So what are the purpose of using expert for internal audit? So the objective of using expert is to allow the internal auditor to place the reliance on the technical work completed, so as to form an opinion and to add further reliability and credibility to the findings of the audit. So the purpose can be technical assistance or support which is taken from the expert or which is obtained from the expert, where the internal audit team does not possess the necessary knowledge or expertise. The second purpose can be to work is performed is in the conference with the applicable pronouncement of the ICI. Third purpose can be the internal auditor procedures conducted in complex and specialized areas meet the expected quality standard. And the fourth purpose can be the outcome of the internal audit work is credible and reliable. So the internal auditor should conduct the procedures to assess the ability of the expert to function in an independent and objective manner, such as the employee of the company or external service provider. If the third party is an external professional, so he will not be influenced by company management in comparison to an expert who is an employee of the company and reporting to the management. Relationship of the expert, where there is any relationship of the expert with the company management, especially with those who have some role in the internal audit assignment, the objectivity of the expert may get compromised. Personal interest. So where the expert has any personal, financial or organizational interest, such as significant portion of his income is derived from the company, it may prevent him from rendering of an unbiased or impartial report. Next can be appointing and supervising authority, where the authority to appoint and supervise the expert rests with someone other than the internal auditor. The outcome of the expert's work may be influenced by such authority. So suppose if you are doing audit of operation and maintenance department, and if you tell the O&M head that we need an expert's advice, or we need an expert services to conduct the technical review, and if he suggests someone, then there can be a possibility that that person is either known to him, or he is having some relationship or personal interest, so he will not be able to give the unbiased report or unbiased opinion. So the qualifications and credentials of the expert. So the internal auditor, shall independently validate the qualification and credential of the expert with procedures which can be confirmation of educational and professional qualification and membership of the personal bodies. So suppose if I'm hiring an engineer, then I'll definitely look at his professional qualification, that if he is having any engineering degree, and from where he has done his engineering, and from which college or which institute, and whether he is having any membership of any professional bodies or not. Second can be background and reference check of the experience or the reputation of that particular candidate. Third can be details and instances and nature of similar past assignment, because there can be a situation where that person is not having any specific degree, but he has done so many assignments of similar nature. So that kind of criteria also we needs to be taken care while selecting the expert. Fourth can be self-certification by the expert regarding his qualification, expertise, or if there are any conflict of interest or any pending disciplinary actions against the expert. So these are some of the requirements. So the internal auditor shall make an independent determination of using the work of an expert based on the technicality and complexity of the subject, risk assessment, materiality and importance of the subject, comparison of the expertise available within the internal audit team to conduct a quality audit. So, if I give you an example of Big Four, so generally in the Big Four, you will find, each type of resources in-house only. So Big Fours hire the IT person also, they hire the chemical engineer, mechanical engineer, civil engineer. So, while doing the internal audit, if, someone wants to use the services of IT person or a civil engineer, then first he can look at internally only, that whether that particular capability is available or not. Then the internal auditor shall conduct an independent evaluation of the qualification and credentials of the expert, which I have already highlighted in the last slide. Then internal auditor shall retain ultimate responsibility for internal audit conclusions and opinions. So, if I'm using an third party, or if I'm using an expert, so as an internal auditor, I cannot say that it is now his responsibility to conclude, because you are the internal auditor, and it will be your responsibility only to get the work completed from the SME or from the expert. Fourth can be defining scope and approach. So the scope and the objective of the work which is required to be done by the expert, that should be clearly defined. Second can be identify the subject matter expert. Third can be define the specific requirement or limitation. So suppose if the scope is very vast, and we are covering only part of the scope, then that limitation or that scope of work should be clearly defined in the work order, or in the communication which we are having with the expert. Fourth can be the information which is required by the expert. Also, the assumption should be clearly defined. What is the extent of access which needs to be given to the expert, and also the clarify the confidentiality of the information requirement. So suppose if we are hiring any third party expert, then generally an non-disclosure agreement, which is NDA, which needs to be signed with the expert, so that whatever information he is getting as part of his review, that information he does not share with anybody else in the market. Next is related to evaluating the work of an expert. So generally, IA, the internal audit, shall perform an evaluation of the work which is completed by the expert, and finding of the expert will also form part of the assurance report. And that evaluation can be based on the detailed review of the report and finding, that the internal audit should review in detail that what is the report which is being given by the expert and what are the kind of findings which are there. Extent and thoroughness of the procedures completed. So for that, generally we define the risk control metrics, or we prepare an RCM at the start of the work, so that RCM generally have all the steps which are performed, because generally there can be a situation where you have taken services from the expert, but you have not got any finding or any observation. So that is perfectly fine if you are not getting any observation. But as it was covered in the last session also by Saurabh, that work not documented is work not done. So suppose if you complete the audit and you say to your partners or the client that there is no observation in the particular area, then client may ask you that what kind of checks or what kind of work you have done, please get it reviewed from us. So it is good that whatever work is either done by the expert or either done by the in-house team, that should be properly and thoroughly recorded somewhere. Any scope limitation or other hurdles which are faced in completing the assignment, such as missing information or access limitation. So if there are any such kind of thing, then that should be brought to notice of the management also. And suppose if you have completed the work and if you are issuing a report and that there are some aspects which you have not reviewed, either there was a very short time or it was asked by the client to exclude that particular thing, then that should be specifically mentioned in the internal audit report as scope limitation. Next can be review of certain work papers to understand the basis of significant observation and harmony with the rest of the IA report. And in exceptional cases, conducting additional procedure or engaging another expert may be required to resolve the inconsistencies also. Next part is related to documentation. So to confirm the compliance of audit procedure with SIA, list of documents which are required is as follows. One is details of procedures which are conducted to validate the requirements of an expert. Next can be details of procedures which were conducted to validate the independence and objectivity of the expert, and details of procedures conducted to verify the qualifications and credentials of the expert, and details of procedures conducted to define the scope, approach, and work plan of the expert, and a summary of the review completed to evaluate the quality and reliability of the work completed. So as I said, suppose if the expert has completed his work, and at the end if somebody comes to you and say that this expert is related to somebody in the organization, or how did you select the expert, so all those documentation and the review documentation of the expert's work, that needs to be retained for future purposes. So I think that's it from my side. If you have any questions or anything, then you can ask them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jitendra sir, for such a in-depth knowledge sharing, valuable sharing of your knowledge with the viewers. And we hope that the overview of the SIAs, both the SIAs as well the in-depth knowledge, will enhance and enlighten the knowledge of viewers as well. And the examples you quote were very valuable. So coming to the question and answer session to both the faculties, we have received a number of queries and questions regarding both the SIAs. So coming to the first question from...
Before that, I would like to say something, Harvinder ji. A very scintillating presentation by both the speakers, Saurabh ji and Jitendra ji. I'm really enjoyed listening to each and every word of it. And I'm receiving so many messages from people who have liked the presentations. I want to thank you all. In fact, I had to go for another meeting. So I'll withdraw and then Harvinder and Kashyapji will take care of the question answers. So thank you for being a part of the ICI. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you, Saurabhji, Jitendraji, Amit Kashyapji, Harvinderji. Have a nice evening. It was a great program and we look forward to hold many such programs in times to come. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much, sir,
Thank you.
for spending your time. So coming to the question session. So Debatrata Roy question is whether all these SIAs are applicable for concurrent audit of banks.
See, I think the SIAs which we have covered today, those are somewhat applicable to banks concurrent audit also, because if you are doing in banks concurrent audit, then there also you will have to prepare the documentation or retain the documentation. There also the objectives of that review will be defined in the letter which is issued to the service provider. So yes, somewhat it will be applicable to that also.
The best thing about these standards is that these are principle based, so these can be taken as the reference for every audit assignment.
Okay. Second question is also related to the same. First was for the concurrent audit, and second question from Vishal Yogesh with Vidara is that are these standards mandatory for internal audits of trust as well?
Yes, these are applicable to all the internal audits. So whether these are of profit organization or for non-profit organizations, these will be applicable.
Okay. Other query from V. Srinivasan ji is whether which one is better, in-house or outside, particularly in a well-spread branch network, that which SIA is better?
Sorry, I did not get the question.
I also did not get, because the question is related to, I think, which one is better, if it is in-house internal audit or outsourced. But I think
yes, internal audit is much better, or outside audit, particularly in a well-spread branch network.
Okay, so it generally depends on organization to organization. So some large organization, like if you give you an example of L&T, so L&T is having an in-house internal audit team, and if I give you an example of Reliance, so Reliance is having an in-house internal audit team, and as well they also take services from other service providers. So it generally depends on the company that how they want to conduct their internal audit. So generally, the internal audit function is outsourced to get the best industry practices, or to do the benchmarking of the current processes.
So, thank you, sir. The next query is from Nitesh Gupta ji. He is asking that what is the use in practical life, that how the internal audit is different from the statutory audit, in particularly considering the SIA 230 objectives regarding what is the practical use.
Can you, Harvinder, can you come again? I think I did not get the question.
Yes, sir. This next query is from Nitesh Gupta ji. He is asking that what is the use in practical life? Like only he's asking how it is different from statutory audit, considering the SIA 230.
See, statutory audit is altogether a different thing, because in the statutory audit, the auditor is certifying the financial statements of the company. But in internal audit, the auditor is only giving an assurance of the internal controls and the processes. So, both are different, and the objectives of both the audits are also different.
Okay. We hope that the questions are well settled by the authors. And sir, one more query. Outside the topic it is from V. Srinivasan. He is asking that what please discuss some journal light and risk-based internal audit regarding the risk-based some light journal.
Sorry, didn't get you. Saurabh, if you got the question, because I did
Sorry,
not.
I also did not get the question.
Actually, he's asking that sir, this topic is outside the preview of today's session, but it is from V. Srinivasan. They are asking that please discuss risk-based internal audit.
Discuss means what? I did not get.
It is just journal query that some please throw some light if possible.
So that is a completely different question, and
yes,
so it's a completely different subject. Yeah.
This is outside the preview. So we are done with the questions part. Questions part is settled. So we hope that the viewers have got the in-depth knowledge of the both of the topics, the 4 standards of internal audit being discussed by CA, both the chartered accountants, Jitendra Indoria sir and CA Saurabh sir, and for the valuable and understandable things, making clear the topics as well. So thank you so much all the faculties to spend your time, and I would like to request CA Sumit Chadha ji, the Secretary of the Yamunanagar branch of the ICAI, to present a vote of thanks.
Please unmute.
Sir, you are on mute, I think, so cannot hear you.
Yeah, sorry. Now I'm audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Thanks, Ravinder ji. Now, first of all, I want to thank our Central Council member in absentia, CA Charanjot Singh Nanda ji, to taken this initiative to update all the CA members on these standards on internal audit. Further, I also want to thank CA Saurabh ji for technical session and CA Jitendra Indoria ji for second technical session for clarity clearing us on the topics related to internal audit. Thanks, sir. Thanks from the core of my heart. And I also want to thank CA Amit Kashyap ji, Chairman Yamunanagar branch, for successfully hosting this webinar. Thanks to faculties and the Yamunanagar branch executive team and internal standard boards, and especially our Central Council member in absentia, of course, CA Charanjot Singh Nanda ji. Thanks to all. Over to you, Harvinder ji.
Thank you so much, sir, for spending your valuable time. And we thank all the faculty members to present over here and all the viewers to present to spend their time. And we hope that you have enhanced your knowledge from this session. So over to you. Anything any faculty would like to add on? Amit Kashyap sir, anything you would like to add?
Was last I also want to thank everybody and all of the speakers, Saurabh Baroda ji, Jitendra Indoria ji, for such a wonderful session. And I think all the queries are resolved regarding to internal audit. And special thanks to Harvinder Kaur madam for such a nice moderator of all the session. Thank you very much, madam. Okay, thanks, sir. Thanks to all. Namaskar.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the tremendous response to the sessions. Both the sessions and overall all the response was very good from the viewers. So we hope even after the session is over, we are receiving the queries from different persons as of now. We can see the response, tremendous response regarding the meeting. So, sir, shall I proceed with the questions even after vote of thanks? But we are receiving the questions. Jitendra sir, Saurabh sir.
Yeah, I think we can take some questions. Not an issue.
Yes, sure.
Even after vote of thanks, we are receiving many questions. So just query from the Sanjay S. Raneji that in case the expert is not willing to share the work papers or his basis of arriving at logical conclusion, what recourse the internal auditor has?
The only recourse is to settle upon the terms of sharing the working papers in advance before engaging the expert. After the engagement and after taking the opinion, the internal auditor will not be left with any other option but to accept that. However, that is not recommendable as per the SIA also. So one should clear the terms of engagement before engaging the expert only.
Okay. The next query from Gopal Subramaniam ji is it mandatory for statutory auditor to consider the findings of internal auditor in his statutory audit report?
यार बंद करने के बाद क्विट करना चाहिए था सेशन ले रही है क्वेश्चन आंसर ले रही है
Harvinder, can you repeat?
Hello.
Yes, sir. Is it mandatory for the statutory auditor to consider the findings of internal auditor in his statutory audit report?
Yes. So, generally when the statutory auditor comes, he, asks for the report of internal auditor and, he sees there's what kind of observations or what kind of gaps which are reported into internal audit report. So, yes, they consider it at the time of finalization.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. Special thanks that even after vote of thanks, you spend your time as a tremendous response to the meeting was there and the questions are coming over and over. But we hope that we have resolved much of the queries from the viewers. So very thanks to all the faculty members, the Yamunanagar branch chairman, secretary, and we hope everyone has got the enlightenment from this meeting. So thank you all. We shall conclude and over the session here. So permission is being sorted from Amit Kashyap sir. Sir, shall we conclude and over the brand?
Okay, madam, we shall conclude.
Okay, sir. Okay, thank you so much, sir. Thank you. The session is over here. Thank you so much.